Okay, you are host again, and just as a note, you're not recording. So.
Okay.
Have a good class. I'm gone.
Thanks. I just had to get my water bottle.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Hello, Bob. This is Kim.
Hi, Kim. Good to see you
if-
again.
Hello. So I can see here that you already made me a call. Should I admit your participants? Should
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
admit them?
We're
Okay,
ready.
thank you.
Yep. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Sherry, Ellen. I don't know who owner is, but maybe they can change their name. Hi, Ellen, Marlene, Martha. Excuse me while I sip a little bit of coffee. I'm still waking up. It's 10 a.m. Pacific time here. Ah, it's tasty. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
So we're here to learn about home networks, huh?
Yes.
All right. All right. Okay. So I'm just curious while we're waiting for some people to come in. Anybody have anything specific they're hoping to get answered about home networks?
I just want to know in general about it, but since we're a little bit early, I wanted to share this with you and the group that since I've been introduced to Just Get Set Up, I'm a fanatic about it. And I just was told last week I logged 9 hours and 25 minutes a day on my computer. Thanks in part, a great deal to Get Set Up.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Well, sometimes you can have too much computer time. So
That is true. That is true. I'm sure I'll get tired of some of the classes I'm taking.
Well, it's interesting that that every time I do a class, there actually is a little bit of a difference because we get different people, we get different questions. So even though the classes really have an agenda and a set of topics we cover for everybody, there's always a few little things we leave room for to cover things that might not be expected unnecessarily. So we're going to talk a little bit about home networks today, and I'm going to try and explain what networking is to everyone, whether you've ever had anyone try and explain it to you or not. So we'll give that a shot. I'm going to share a few slides. Think about some questions that have come up, some things that, things that I wish I understood when somebody says this term or this topic or something like that, and we'll take a look around in a few minutes. Okay, so let me get my screen set up here properly for the right kind of sharing, so I share the right information with you, and we will get started here. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you should see let me share one more thing here. Hi, Judy, welcome. We'll get a few more people coming in. There we go. And let's record. And now I can share my screen. Okay, so we are recording the session of Home Networks Explained. We seem to do this seems to get scheduled on Sundays, along with another class I'm doing in about an hour and a half called Virtual Backgrounds for Zoom for Beginners. I don't know if any of you signed up for that or not, but that seems to be a popular one as well. A little bit about me. I'm in Seal Beach, California. I was born in the Midwest and came out here to go to college and pretty much stayed. Yesterday, actually, I went out with a friend. I went to University of California, Riverside, and I went out to see a friend out at Riverside, and we visited the campus. It's very quiet right now because of COVID, so it was easy to find parking, and Of course, everything's like 50 years old, so it's like, not a lot's there, and a lot's changed. A lot of new buildings have gone up, but it was kind of an interesting trip. And I really enjoy trying to make technology simpler to understand for people. And technology is kind of a hobby for me that I keep up with on a regular basis. I've been in the technology business my whole career. And when you've done something your whole life, learning a little bit more is a little bit easier bit by bit. Okay, so we're a learning community, and if you have your camera on, it helps me because I can see you wave if you're trying to get my attention. Okay, you can request a recording after class. I don't know how many of you have ever done that. Anybody requested a recording after, to watch a recording? I find the live, classes really, really valuable, and we do live stream these. And so if you're joining by live stream, we encourage you to join getsetup.io. You don't have to take 9 hours a day of classes like Laura did, but a lot of people, I recommended it to a friend, Laura, and she actually ended up taking 60 classes the first month. Sherry, did you have something you wanted to say? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, so what does it mean to join by live stream?
Oh, okay. Wow, you're going to ask the tough questions already. All right. All right.
You said it.
Yes, yes. Well, live streaming means that we are broadcasting the class live on streaming services like Facebook and YouTube and our own Get Set Up TV. I don't know if you visited the Get Set Up website recently, but there is a button on the left for Get Set Up TV. And we do, broadcast a certain number of classes live every day so that people can see them, even though they may not join Get Set Up, or they may not want to enroll in the class. They can still watch the class, and they just can't participate in that, ask questions like our members do. We're not paid to promote any questions. That pretty much explain live streaming, Sherry?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, that's, let me put 1 in the plus column for Bob. It's technology term today. Okay. So I have actually a library of technology terms that I used to explain to students at community college classes, and still do that. And a lot of it's just understanding the vocabulary. So we are going to look at a few things like network ABCs. Okay. So there's some terminology that people throw around about networks. And obviously the first is, what is a network? And we are going to cover that. And we'll talk about why networks have become so valuable. We'll take a look at these things like routers and Wi-Fi and Ethernet. And we'll take a look at maybe some problem solving tips, and some things that might help you with your network since we depend on them so much. So before we get into diving into some of the topics, anybody have any ABCs or network terms or anything they're hoping to learn more about today? And I'm going to sip a coffee. This is my coffee break sip. Okay. Well, I see if there's any questions. Okay.
Anything I can learn, I'll be ecstatic about.
Okay, great. Well, we've learned what live streaming is already, so that's a good start. So you're actually going to hopefully learn quite a bit more than you think. So Martha sent something. How to more efficiently send and share info between Macs and PCs, upstairs and downstairs. Oh, okay, that's a tough one, but we can talk a little bit about the cloud. Okay, and there actually is a class I do called Understanding the Cloud, which doesn't explain how to actually use a cloud service, but it helps explain the concepts of what the cloud is and how it works. And that's probably the best way for you to utilize your network, Martha, is to use a cloud service to be able to move things between them. But when you have a Mac and a PC, do you have both Windows and Macs in your home, Martha? Well, congratulations. You have become what is officially known as a systems integrator. And this is what drives people crazy, is that you didn't go to school to become a systems integrator, did you, Martha? Okay, so I did, sort of. I actually went into a career in technology. And what I ended up discovering was that when there are people whose jobs it is in the profession of information technology to make sure that technology from one company works together with technology from another company. So if you look at what we probably use, Macs, iPhones, Windows PCs, network routers from another company, internet service from an internet service provider, cellular service. Maybe we use Gmail or Yahoo Mail or something else. We're using a lot of different technologies, and the task of making it all work together falls to you and me. Okay, we have to figure it out. So welcome to the job. If anybody asks you what you do now at home all day, and say, well, I'm integrating my systems, you know, so that's what. So it's really a job. It really takes a lot of work. Fortunately, most things work together, and networks do make things work together. Thanks, Kim, for answering the question in chat. Appreciate that. And we'll talk a little bit more about things. With the cloud class, I'd recommend for you if you're interested in learning more about that. Okay. So let's take a look at some technology that has to do with networks and why they exist, why they've become helpful, and what we can use them for, and then some of the technology that makes up networks. A network is just a way of connecting up computers or devices to each other. And we're going to ask your permission. Sometimes microphones from laptops and desktops pick up a little bit of noise. They can pick up scratching paper sounds and things like that. So Kim might mute all occasionally if we do have some background noise that that interferes. But that it's nothing we want to be rude about. It's just that the noise can carry over the way Zoom works and the way computer microphones work. Okay, so computers and devices are connected together by wires or cables, or even wirelessly by radio waves. And when you connect computers or devices like smartphones and tablets together, it creates a network. They can send and receive information like files from each other. And that's what makes a network. And of course, there are bigger and bigger networks all the time, but in our home, we typically have a few pieces of equipment that we connect through a device called a router, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So networks have eliminated the need for physically moving things. Some of you might remember floppy disks or DVDs or CDs. You know, we buy computers now. If you bought a computer recently, it didn't come with a floppy disk drive or a movable disk drive or even a DVD drive built in. It might have a USB connection for you to plug in a flash drive, but maybe not. And you know, we don't have too many VHS tapes around anymore, although I do know some people that have them. And we do things like streaming music over the internet now. We listen to radio, but we also get music by streaming it over the internet. And like we're live streaming this broadcast over the internet to people that are watching on Facebook and YouTube. So it eliminates the need for physically copying something onto a piece of media and moving it with a piece of physical device that you might have to move around. And that's what networking does. It makes it really easy to do that. Okay. There actually are a lot of different types of networks. There are computer networks, right? But there's also something called the telephone network. I mean, some of you may still have landline phones. You know, I don't know if any of you do, but you might. There are cellular networks that run off of cell towers. There are electric networks where electricity gets generated at power stations and hydroelectric dams and gets sent across on electric wires and shows up in our house. There's radio networks, there's television networks. Those are wireless networks. You don't really need to be physically connected to anything with a cable in order to listen to the radio or listen to television. Now, most of us have cable, but wireless TV still works. It's just digital now instead of of analog, but it still works. So you know a lot of networks, and a lot of these things have standards built in. So when you tap in a telephone number on a phone, somehow or another, the system knows to get you connected with somebody else on the other end. And you don't really know where the wires are and where the equipment is that makes that happen, or even how it makes it happen. But you just know that when you tap in a telephone number, somebody else's phone's going to ring. And if they pick it up, you can talk to them, right? And that's what makes networks really, really good, is when they're easy to use. It's like if you go out and buy a coffee maker today at Best Bed Bath and Beyond or wherever, and you bring it home, you're pretty confident. You may not even thought about it, but you're pretty confident that that electrical plug is going to plug into a wall outlet somewhere in your home so that you can use the electricity. But you don't know where the electricity was made. You might have driven by a power plant, somewhere, but you don't really know whether your power is coming from that particular plant or how the wires are actually set up that eventually get it to your home. But you do know that if you have a two-prong plug, you can plug it into pretty much any wall outlet in the United States and it's going to work, don't you? And that's a network. That's what network. So we will mostly work, when we talk about computer networks, they're really just networks for computers instead of power or radio or TV or telephones. They're computer networks, and they work with data and sending files to and from people. So you're really a network expert, and you didn't know it. Okay, it just you didn't realize these things were all networks you just use every day. I mean, you use the interstate highway system. That's kind of a network too. It connects things together. Only we use vehicles to move on those networks. So any questions about what a network is? And now hopefully you feel more confident about the fact that you know a lot of networks already. Okay. Data networks are what people get confused by. As soon as you start bringing computers into the topic of conversation, it's like this barrier occurs between understanding and not understanding things that are similar. Data networks are just a way of moving a piece of electrical information. Okay, so I was watching a PBS special about the invention of the smartphone, and they talked about how Samuel Morse invented Morse code. And he figured out the reason he was so valuable in technology. He figured out how to send a dot and a dash over an electric wire. Okay, before electric wires just sent one continuous signal, but he figured out how to break that signal up into a long signal and a short one. And so by creating a code, he could actually communicate information with dots and dashes over electricity. And all of a sudden, telegraphs, wires sprung up all over the world, and it changed the amount of time. Instead of having to send a letter by boat, you could, if you had an electric wire running across the Atlantic Ocean, you could send a short message by telegram, and it could get to people in a matter of minutes or seconds even. And so that cable that carries the message is made up of one or more wires. And Ethernet is the data standard that has become the industry standard for data networks for computers. I worked for one of the companies that was involved in establishing the Ethernet standard. And the advantage of a standard is just like your electrical outlet, it works all the time. As long as you have a plug that fits an electrical outlet, you can plug something in. Okay, 110 volt AC, you kind of just assume that's the way things work. A 7-digit phone number in the US, you just kind of assume that's the way things work. So industries create standards, and one of the standards for data networks is the biggest one, called Ethernet. Not the only one, but it's the biggest one. Okay, and it works on cable or wirelessly or on Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is simply wireless Ethernet. Okay, that's all it is. And most of the time we connect on Wi-Fi, but cables and Wi-Fi work the same. There's other networks too. Bluetooth is another data network. It was invented by Nokia so that people didn't have to use a cable to have earbuds on their phones when they wanted to talk and receive and listen to people when they made cell phone calls. And it was a short distance communication that used very little power, but it's another type of data network. You might have a Bluetooth speaker, or you might use Bluetooth for hands-free calling. And so somehow or another, the sound from your phone gets to your car, and from your car to your phone. That's a way information gets moved. Now, Ethernet will not talk directly to Bluetooth. There has to be something in there that converts it, which is why these are different data networks. The GPS system, where satellites up in the sky tell us our location, that's another type of network that gives location information, latitude and longitude, anywhere in the world, but it's a different network, okay? And then there are some devices that work on home automation called the Internet of Things that sometimes even use a different network. There's a lot of different networks, but Ethernet has become so popular. And so every computer that's equipped with Ethernet, whether it works off of a cable or a Wi-Fi, can talk to an Ethernet network, okay? Martha has a question about different data frequencies. We'll talk about that. Yes, networks do have different frequencies because an organization called the Federal Communications Commission, let me change my color here. Okay, so it's brighter. The FCC regulates, and there's international organizations that regulates frequencies, just like a radio station has a frequency like 1040 AM, and there's AM radio and there's FM radio. AM works on certain frequencies, FM works on certain frequencies, TV works on frequencies, microwaves work on certain frequencies. Even our microwave ovens at home are regulated by the Federal Communication Commission. And so all frequencies across the radio spectrum are assigned, by the Federal Communications Commission for certain uses. Some are military only. So there's all. Wi-Fi actually uses two specific frequencies that we'll talk about, and you probably have seen them used a little bit, but they use two specific frequencies. You might connect computers. Anything that has a computer in it is often called a smart device. So you have smart TVs and you have I have a smart washer and dryer. It's not as smart as I'd like it, but it does tell me when it's time to run a clean cycle. And it does tell me, when a load is done, but I can hear the tone easily. But it does, a really smart one would automatically switch the load and then fold the clothes when they come out of the dryer, right? But at least it communicates, but it communicates on Wi-Fi. So you'll see the term smart, but printers, tablets, smartphones, Amazon, Google, Apple TV, they're all connecting up to networks, and they all connect typically with either a cable or Wi-Fi, and they're all typically using Ethernet. Okay, Ethernet means both wired and wireless. It just depends on how you connect on Ethernet. And as our homes get more connected with devices, we depend more and more on our network to make things work, don't we? Okay, so when you're sending information to and from the internet, you're typically sending it from your home to a device in your home called a router, to your internet service provider, and they have computers located in data centers, and they take care of connecting you out on the internet. And so these facilities are really facilities that exist that have computers filling them from floor to ceiling, and they're run by Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft. So when you send a message away from you, outside of your home, when it goes from your router to your internet service provider and send it out, it's leaving you, and that's what's commonly referred to as going out to the cloud. But the cloud just consists of all the wires and cables that are outside of your home and all the data centers that are located all over the world that take care of that. But they're all connected, and they're all connected using Ethernet technology usually, because that's the way computers really communicate. So because there's some standards on the web, there are some internet terms that might help you understand what's going on with a network. There are computers that are connected together. If they're connected in your home, you have a home network. If you're connected to the internet, you're part of the internet. The internet is a type of network. So if you think of like the military probably has a private network that's only military computers. Some companies might have a corporate network that's only businesses and corporations, and other people might have a private network. But the internet is available for people to connect to. And once you're connected to the internet, you can get to anywhere on the internet you need to or want to. The way you get to places on the internet is oddly, I think, similar to the way the Postal Service works. When you put a piece of information in an envelope, think of it as a computer file, but you're putting it in an envelope, and you have to say, where do I want to send this to? You have to put a name, a street number, a street name, a city, a state, and a zip code on the envelope, right? And if you want to get it back, or say someone doesn't know how to send something back to you, you would put a return address in the upper left-hand corner. So the post office has some standards. They say, hey, put your return address in the upper left-hand corner and put your to address in the middle. And the internet has something similar. It's called a Uniform Resource Locator, or URL. And it's an address. We tend to use the internet mostly for the web, but it is a resource for a web page. And so when you're going to google.com or getsetup.io, it's an address that the internet uses to say, where do you want to go? And then you have a return address so that things can come back to you. Because the internet likes numbers better than words, all of these URLs are converted to what's called an Internet Protocol address. And that's for a specific or computer or device. So every device you have in your home is given an IP address automatically by a device called a router. Ones on the internet like google.com or getsetup.io, where they have to be found by other people, they have a specific IP address, but the internet has systems that convert these URLs to IP addresses, and then they use it to send and receive information across a network. That's the IP address is part of the internet and part of the internet Ethernet system that says, I know where the message is going to, and I know where to send something back if I want to send something back. So all devices on the internet have an IP address, and that makes it possible to send and receive things to and from different computers and devices. It's kind of amazing. Now, this didn't all pop up out of the clear blue. It took a lot of step-by-step, processes, but they happen over time really faster. If you took a look at what happened in the past 20 years, it probably took 50 years before that, and to make the same amount of things happen. So things happen really, really fast with technology now, so that things are possible. But every smart device you have in your home has an IP address. You just don't need to know about it because it's becoming like the telephone system. It usually works, okay? So you're just constantly sending things out to places and receiving things. And that's what networks do. They send and receive information and make it possible to send things like documents, things like audio, things like video, like we're doing now, things like live streaming, things like music, pictures, movies, everything. So it makes it possible to do that. It's just a matter of what you're sending and receiving that's different. It's still going over the network. So instead of a TV show going over TV broadcasting, it's data that's going over wires or wireless. And that's how networks work, because they send and receive things between devices. Now, Ethernet is something you may or may not know about, but it's this computer industry standard. The standard gets down to defining things as specific as how many wires are in the Ethernet connector. Okay, so just like our electrical plug has two prongs that are shaped in a certain size and shape, Ethernet connectors have a certain size and shape to them that's set by a standard that computer industry and government and other people participate in. How many wires are in this connector is also a standard. And what do the wires do is a standard as well. And Wi-Fi is a standard. It's the wireless version of Ethernet. And it has a set of standards as well. What frequencies, how much range can it transmit? There's actually a specification for how long an Ethernet cable can be and still work. Okay, and if somebody, you have a computer that has an Ethernet port on it, just like your electrical plug, if you've got an Ethernet plug, you can plug it into that port without any problem. Kind of like USB, you probably have plugged things in and out of your USB connector on your computer. That's an industry standard, that USB. So if you buy something that plugs into USB, you are pretty confident it's going to work if you have a USB jack, to plug it into, right? So these things that we take for granted really were pretty well thought out by a lot of people that evolved these things, because it's better for all the businesses and governments and people if everything works together more easily, as opposed to saying, well, if you have a HP computer, you have to use this type of Ethernet connector. If you have a Dell computer, you have to use this type of Ethernet connector. If you have a Lenovo or an Apple, you have to use a different type of connector. And so those things are not, they're company standards, they're not industry standards. And industry standards make it much, much easier for people to connect things together. And so lots of times industry standards come about as a result of company standards as well. Kind of an interesting background on different technologies. You may not care, but I always find it fascinating, and people tend to like to understand what's behind that, if you're that kind of person, okay? Okay, so your home router, obviously, this is my router. It actually is a picture I took of my router, but your router may look slightly different. That's okay. Routers are devices that route internet traffic. So if you think of like a dispatcher in a train depot that sends one train to Kansas City and another one to Detroit and another one to, Austin, Texas, and another one to Los Angeles, and another one to New York, they're routing traffic, aren't they? Well, routers do exactly the same thing, only for computer networks. They route traffic. Oh, your smartphone wants to send a message to the internet. Okay, I'm going to take care of that. Your Mac in your basement wants to send a message to your speakers upstairs. I'll take care of that. And so that's what routers do. Routers have a couple of different things. Okay, they do have wireless antennas usually, not a requirement, but most of them do. And the antennas are used for the Wi-Fi form of communications. Okay, you might have 1, 3, 6, I mean, they're made in all kinds of configurations, but that's the wireless, and they broadcast and receive on the 2 Wi-Fi frequencies. There's 2.4 gigahertz, which is the older one, and it's been around a long time and it's very dependable and reliable. And there's another one called 5 gigahertz. That's the frequency that the Federal Communications Commission has reserved for Wi-Fi. Now, when home networks started out, 2.4 gigahertz was used because it was readily available. But some household devices like microwave ovens use a frequency that's really, really close to this. And so there was sometimes some interference. So what the industries did was they said, let's find another frequency where there's less interference. And so they set aside the 5 gigahertz frequency also. So you actually have not 1, but 2 frequencies for Wi-Fi. Either one will work, okay? You also have Ethernet ports on a router, okay? Typically they come with 4. I don't know why, but they typically come with 4. And you can take that Ethernet cable that from whatever device you have and plug it in here, and it'll actually connect to an Ethernet, jack on something else. So wired connections are incredibly reliable, and so they're always preferred if you can. But Wi-Fi works a lot. Wi-Fi means you don't have to run wires all over the house. There's a special connector that's usually one that has a different color on it. And this is the one that connects up to your ISP. Let me make that. Forgive my writing here. I'm writing with my mouse. ISP, your internet service provider. And most of the time, it'll connect up to a box, okay, that's called a modem. Okay, it's just a black box, and the wire goes into the box, and then a wire goes out of the modem to wherever your internet service wants to connect it to on their end, okay? So sometimes it's coaxial cable, sometimes it's fiber, just depends on your internet service provider, but they give you this modem. They sometimes give you the router, and sometimes they give you one box that's both a router and a modem. So you might find a separate router and a separate modem. You might find one box that's a router and modem combined in one, okay? And that's usually provided by your internet service provider. So if you have problems connecting from your router to the internet, they're the ones that you would call for support. You can replace routers, okay? It is possible to replace them and get upgrades. We'll talk a little bit about why you might want to do that at some point. Okay, so networks have a broadcasting name that they use. They use something called an SSID. And SSID, I'll be honest, I honestly don't remember what it stands for because I don't use it that much. But SSID is a term that describes the name of a Wi-Fi hotspot. And so when you're looking to join a Wi-Fi hotspot and you see a network name, that's what it is. I'm going to just show you, real quickly what it looks like on a phone here. So let me stop sharing this and let me start sharing my phone. Switching between sharing can be, sometimes it works really well. There we go. Okay. So this is my settings on my iPhone, and here's Wi-Fi. I'm connected. So if I tap on Wi-Fi, it'll show me my networks. My networks are named Bobology, and there's the 5G. And instead of using 2.4, they just call it 2G. That's what most of them do. And once you enter a password for a network, your phone will typically remember it. Most of the time, your computer, your phone will. But you see all these other networks. So here's Direct FP Fire TV. I have no idea whose that is. Here's Helen 2G. Helen's one of my neighbors. Here's a Netgear, that's probably a neighbor. Here's a Wi-Fi, probably a neighbor. And so your phone has an antenna, and your routers, the routers nearby you have an antenna, and they are broadcasting the SSID. That's what this is. This is the SSID of these routers, okay? And so when you go to a Starbucks or a library or restaurant or any place else that has Wi-Fi, and you open up your Wi-Fi on your phone, it'll say, it'll show you like start all the different networks. And if you have a password, you can enter the password. So if you tap on, say, Helen 2G, it says, I got to enter the password. Okay. So if I don't know the password, I can't get on that network. But some networks are public and some require a password. It just depends on the router. Most of the time when you get your router from your internet service, they include they make sure it's set up with the password. So if we go back and look at my slide here where I took a photo of my network, now you know that this is my SSID and this is the password to get on the network. I've changed it since then, but you can work with your ISP to change it, but that's what you need to know. And they broadcast it so that's part of the Wi-Fi standard, is they broadcast their name. Now, Wi-Fi networks are controlled by the Federal Communications Commission, so that if you have a router antenna here and it's broadcasting information, it has a certain amount of power and a certain amount of range, and it kind of goes down with distance, so that the further you away from the router's antenna, the difference it makes. Yes, and the best way to change your ISP, your router password, if you're not familiar with your router, would be to call your internet service provider. If you buy your own router, you'll have to follow the instructions from the manufacturer's website for changing it. They usually give you pretty clear instructions, and many of them give you apps now where you can manage it via an app from your smartphone too. Okay. Are we learning a lot about networks? We're learning too much. I hope it's not too much, but we're learning a little bit about networks, and we're going to go into some things, okay, about a few other things with networks. Let me get to my slide here and go one more. So this is how it all works. Your device, typically you're connecting up by Wi-Fi to your router, and then your router might have a modem built in, but if it doesn't, it's connected to your ISP's modem, and they get you out to the internet. And that's their job. Internet service provider. Their job is to get you on the internet and get you, okay? So Martha has a question. Well, network key is somehow or another, I have no idea how that name got created, but it is the password. Network key and password have exactly the same meaning. And I think the idea being is that because a lot of network connections showed a little lock on it, somebody came up with a bright name and said, oh, let's call that a key for people to get onto their network, but it's really the password to get onto the network. It's the exact same thing. So somebody invented a different name and kind of stuck for a while, but it's really just the password. Now, some of you may wonder, well, gosh, Bob, I want to be able to work in my family room. I got, a network here, a network there. What are some things I can do to extend the range of my network? Common problem, okay? Okay, because we're using networks a lot. We want to be able to get on the network everywhere. There's kind of three ranges of devices you can use. One is the lowest cost is something called a Wi-Fi range extender. The mid-range is something called a power line range extender. And then there's something called a mesh network that covers a whole house, including like garage and, you know, upstairs, downstairs, everything, okay? All the network companies make them, okay? So what I do is I rely on a website, excuse me, called Wirecutter that helps me kind of figure out what to buy. I've used them for a lot of things. They're owned by the New York Times, but they're pretty impartial. And so what I do is I find, you know, they have everything from sheets to everything, but they're really good on electronics. Consumer Reports is really good as well. And of course, you've got Amazon reviews, but these companies, Wirecutter and Consumer Reports, testing. Consumer Reports requires a subscription, but you can often find it through your public library as well. But they don't test as many products lots of times. So this is I went to Wirecutter and went to electronics. You're going to get the link in the email. And I went to networking, and it just shows different things like the best Wi-Fi hotspot. Okay. The best cable modem. That's a combined cable, you know, modem and router. Here's the best power line networking adapter, VPNs if you want to learn more, Wi-Fi, reliable Wi-Fi, best Wi-Fi router, best mesh, you know, so lots and lots of different things that help me. And I use them a lot to try and figure out what I should get, okay, because I don't know it all. And so one of the least expensive, these are Wi-Fi range extenders are typically under $50. So if you have Wi-Fi in most of your home, but there's maybe a room or two that don't get it very strong, or it's not, signal's not good. For $50, you can buy what's called a Wi-Fi range extender. They plug into the wall. They have an app that you use to make sure you get it on your current Wi-Fi network, and then it rebroadcasts the signal from its location. So it's kind of like a rebroadcasting of your network, and it kind of extends the range. Another tool is a power line. You can actually run Ethernet over electrical power wires. And these are adapters. You plug one in next to your router, plug an Ethernet cable into your router, and then take the other range extender and plug it into an electrical outlet somewhere else in your home. And you then have an Ethernet connection, or if you get a more expensive model Wi-Fi, these are about $100 to $120 for a pair. So if you're wanting to run a wired Ethernet connection from your router to somewhere else in your home, this gives you the capability to do it, okay? And then the more expensive one, from about $200 to $400, they have these things called mesh networks. And that gives you the ability to basically expand your network just by using these little desktop pods. They have to plug in to a power outlet, but they pick up your Wi-Fi signal and they rebroadcast it in many places in your home, wherever you end up putting a pod. It creates it basically. And so you can roam the house and you're on the same network, no matter where you are. You're not on a different network because you have a different device. You're on the same network. And most of these use apps for doing things. So again, just getting Wi-Fi pushed out a little further from where you are, or running it over power lines, or getting a whole house mesh network and saying, I'm just gonna spend the money and tackle the whole thing all at once, depending on how big a space you've got. So those are ways to extend range. Any questions about those? Now, I don't know how many of you are in situation. Oh, Sherry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Am I muted? I don't think so. No. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Does a better router have more coverage as well?
Yes, it does. If I look at Wirecutter here, and we look down for the best Wi-Fi router, they will, tell you that a better router will give you better coverage, and so it says if your router is more than a couple of years old and struggling in more places, meaning more rooms or not, a new router or a mesh networking kit, depends on how much space you've got to cover. And this will give you access to probably a medium house, maybe about 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. If you've got a bigger 2-story, a mesh would probably be a little bit better. Okay, just because you've got more rooms. What happens is that when you've got plumbing, like pipes and things like that, they actually interfere with wireless signals. And so sometimes, having something, like that would work. But you can always try buying one router, and see if that works. Or if it doesn't, get it from someplace that has good return policies. And then you could see if you need to go to a mesh network. And I mean, Costco and, Target and other places sell mesh networks too these days. That's your internet service provider is not going to give you the best quality router. They're going to give you a good enough one. But if and you should check with them every so often too, to see if you can get an updated model or not, if they'll give you a new model depending on how old yours is. If it's typically 3 or 4 years old, sometimes newer models have better capabilities too. Usually, I mean, that's more than enough. Lots of times routers never get replaced and they're working reliably for a really long time. Okay, the other question is, how fast is my internet, right? Okay, so there are speed test services out there for free. Your internet service provider, so say you're buying a plan that says you're getting 100 megabits per second download and a minimum 5 megabits per second upload. Well, what that means is basically how many bits per second, how many little pieces of data are able to come down as fast as possible. With Zoom and Netflix and other things, you really don't need more than about 5 megabits per second download speed. That's what's coming from the internet to you. If you're broadcasting internet, like I do a lot of Zoom meetings, I upgraded, so I got a little faster upload so that it's faster for my video and other signals to go out to the internet. But that's not necessary for most people. And how do you test it? Well, there are testing sites like speedtest.net. Your internet service may have one as well. You're going to get a link to this in the email. And if you just go to the website and click go, it'll run a network test. It'll check your download speed and it'll check your upload speed and let you know, what you're getting. So I'm using a power line range extender in my home office, and I get a 50 megabits per second download, which is more than enough. I get about 15 to 20 upload, which is more than enough. But if you have more devices that are using the internet, say you've got one person watching Netflix in one room and another one watching Netflix in another, you each are going to need 5 to 10 megabits per second. So going to 200 megabits per second doesn't necessarily mean your network's going to work any better, because it's probably more than enough for what the computer and the information needs to be able to do. And sometimes Wi-Fi is faster than wired. It can work either way. It just kind of depends on which, but wired tends to be a little more dependable when you're using an internet connection is all. So checking your speed is helpful, and checking your range is helpful. And sometimes things just drop off the network, right? And so in trying to be a network detective, which is what you have to kind of be to solve problems, checking the settings in your device, am I on the right network? You can turn the network off or on your device. You can turn your device off, power cycle it. That's one of the most common things that you hear from technical support hotlines is, well, first let's power off your router and then let's power off your modem. But sometimes it helps to actually power off everything, including all your computers, and then start turning on things from the modem and the router, and then, one computer, one device at a time. And so just depends. Routers will typically reconnect to signals. Printers will reconnect when you do that. And so other problems are typically going to be things that your internet service provider can help you solve, because they're there to help you get connected to the internet and make sure your connection's working right. And there are occasionally problems with their cables on their end. Okay, so hopefully we've learned some network ABCs and what things like routers and Wi-Fi and Ethernet are, and other networks that you use, and a few tips. So before I do some of the closing slides, let's see if we have any questions from people that I might have missed. Thank you, by the way, Kim, for answering a few things in chat. And did we get to everybody that had a question in chat? Anybody that we missed?
Will you be doing this again, Bob?
It seems like I am scheduled to do this. I don't make up the schedule for Get Set Up, but I seem to get this set up, get this scheduled every, it seems to be a Sunday morning class for some reason that gets scheduled. I'm not sure why, but it just happens. So yeah, I will be doing this again. Yeah, it's becoming, I think as people are starting to understand networks are as important as their computers, and they're getting more skills with different things, they're starting to learn more about wanting to learn more about networks too.
Okay.
And of course,
Thank
it's
you.
recorded too. Yeah, Diane, you have a question?
Yes. So Comcast, in my case, in the Chicago area, is my ISP. Is that right?
It sounds like they are, yes. If you're paying
Okay.
them a fee for internet, yes.
So my next question, as you say, they never contact the customer to say, hey, we have a much more updated router for you.
No,
It happens by happenstance when something goes wrong and I do need help and a service call. That's when I find out that I have such an outdated router.
yes.
But my next question is, does it pay for a homeowner to buy their own router and cut that monthly cost from Comcast? Or is there an added benefit to having the ISP handle that stuff for you?
The benefit of having the router provided by the ISP is that if anything goes wrong with it, they're going to take responsibility for it. And they're included with your service and support. So they can diagnose it, they can get access to it remotely, and they can see, they can solve problems. So if you're not technically proficient with understanding your way around a router and you don't want to learn, letting them take care of the router is probably worth it.
Thanks.
Sure. Let me share a few slides and I'll still stay on for questions. I want to do the closing here for us. And cloud classes, understanding and using the cloud. I do that. It's more about what the cloud is, where you get your hands on it, those types of things. Learning about some of the cloud, Google Drive, OneDrive, other things. We're doing a new class on Microsoft 365. I do classes on Windows 10 settings. I was living abroad and I do a class on living or retiring abroad, because eventually we may get to travel abroad again, hopefully. You're going to get class notes. You're going to get an email that will like, have notes and information, share the class with a friend, give us some feedback, let us know how we did. We appreciate that. When you start registering for classes now, you may notice that you can invite a friend. And like say, I mean, I invited friends and they've ended up taking a lot of classes with Get Set Up. If you're interested, you can actually host your own interest group if you want to. So you could take on an interest group in home networks, right? For people that were interested in home networks, suggest a new class. You can communicate with us anytime at help@getsetup.io. And if you've got a success story, about something that happened in class, send us an email, let us know. We'd like to hear about it. So said, hey, this class helped me figure this out, or this helped me solve a problem. I had somebody who said the microphone hadn't been working on their computer for 7 months until they took a class on, and I showed how to fix to manage your network settings or your microphone settings. Request a recording, and we're always happy to see you again. And maybe I'll see you in my next class in half an hour on Zoom virtual background.
Oh,
So
yeah.
anybody have any questions about networking before we say goodbye to each other for the morning or afternoon or whichever it is for you?
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah,
Glad-
thanks so much.
We'll see you, Bob.
Good to learn something today. Take care.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.